It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
This next question is from Jared, Brian. Or Jared, comma, Brian. I have an old traditional 401k I left at an old employer. If the backdoor goes away, would you recommend I'd roll that into an IRA, then use the $6K per year for taxes to convert it to Roth? So his question is kind of full-fold. We know that there's some legislation potentially coming down the pipe that could suggest they won't allow conversions of after-tax dollars anymore. One of the strategies you could have done is if all your assets are in 401ks, you can do a non-deductible contribution to a traditional IRA, and then you can convert that to a Roth IRA tax-free if you have the right account structure in place. Well, what he's saying is, hey, if that goes away, that 401k that I left at the old 401k so that I could do this, should I just roll that into an IRA? So his first question is, when does it make sense to roll into an IRA? What are the benefits of doing that? I think it would be valuable to talk about. And then I'm going to simplify his question. And then should I start converting that to Roth? Like once I do it, should I just start doing Roth conversions? Should I turn it into Roth dollars?
Yeah, there's a lot there. And unfortunately, Jared, I don't know you. I don't know your income. I don't know your risk profile. I don't know how good your current 401k is. So I can't give you exactly specific advice. But I can at least give everyone some things to think about. Mm-hmm. First of all, tax legislation. The one thing you can count on is dysfunction out of Washington, D.C. So I don't, because if you make your career pontificating off of or reading the tea leaves of what's going to happen in D.C. Now, look, it might be very profitable if you have a talk radio show or if you write books and other things. But if you're actually trying to make financial decisions off of it, be very careful because these things change dramatically because, realize they're politicians. So they say stuff all the time to try to get the people they think that are voting for them excited, energized, and motivated. But that's not – do you think about all the times people who are politicians will say something they know has zero chance of actually becoming reality? It happens all the time. They call it red meat in politics. So be aware that the things that are proposed, sometimes people – put it out there more as a negotiation tactic as well as to energize the people they think that are going to vote for them more than they think it's actually going to become reality. So I always tell people, don't actually focus on the legislation. You can keep up with it just because it's smart to be an educated person with your investments and what's going on in the world. But don't actually start creating action until you have something is going to become reality. So I have studied, we've done content on the proposed legislation, but we're not implementing complete changes in strategies until something actually changes because there's a chance that we might have gridlock and things don't happen everybody thinks. So we'll have to see. So that's the first thing. Tax legislation, wait to see what happens, but it is one of those things to keep an eye on because the Backdoor Roth has a target on it right now, might be going away. So that leads to the next point, 401k. What do you do? The reason we like 401ks to hold assets, in the past it was because you can do Roth conversion strategies. If you make too much money to contribute to a Roth directly, if you had all other money out and you had no IRA assets except for inherited IRAs or Roth IRAs, then you could potentially contribute to a traditional IRA and then convert that tax-free, since it was after-tax contributions, into a Roth IRA. That might be going away, so that a lot of people are going to be thinking, well, maybe I just roll this into an IRA rollover now. But there are benefits to 401ks. They have what's called ERISA protection from creditors. So that's something, but fortunately, most of us aren't getting sued every day. So it's something to be aware of. But for a lot of us, it's a smaller risk. What the bigger cost that you need to look at with your 401k is, what are the investments inside of there? What are the costs within that 401k? So if you're in a 401k with a small employer and this was just his golf mate, or maybe a college roommate that now has sold this bad plan where it has high cost, horrible investments, doesn't even have access to index funds and other things, you might be looking at this going, man, it made sense when I could do the Roth conversion strategy because maybe you just have to love the one you're with because you're trying to build up some tax-free assets. But now that that's gone, maybe I do want to where I have complete control, because once you at least roll it into an IRA rollover, if you chose a low-cost provider, a Fidelity Investments, a Vanguard, a Charles Schwab, you now control every component, what are their costs, how it's going to be managed. there's a lot of benefit to that. So you need to take that into consideration. Bo, what else am I leaving? Because there's so many things, meaty things I could talk about on what do you do with Roth conversions? What do you do with IRA rollovers? What are some components I'm missing out on for Jared?
I think you hit the two big ones is that oftentimes when you get to choose your IRA rollover provider, you get to choose a cost you pay. With your 401k, it's kind of love the one that you're with. So you might have lower fees. And then it does open up the investment options to the entire investment universe. You're not just captivated to the 5 or 10 funds inside the 401k. You can invest in anything, which may be a pro or a con. I'll handle sort of his back half of his questions. Okay, once I do that, should I then start converting $6,000 a year into Roth? It's really difficult to know that without knowing your specific situation. Because if you're in a higher tax bracket, even though we love Roth dollars, we love tax-free dollars in your 3-bucket strategy, if you're in the 30, 35, 37, maybe 39% federal tax bracket, it's going to be very costly to start converting those dollars to Roth. Now, if you're in a lower tax bracket, lower income, where you're not having to pay that, it potentially could make sense. But I'd argue if you fall into one of those lower brackets, rather than trying to do conversions, I would figure out, man, could I max out my 401k, drive my income below the Roth limits, and just do regular Roth IRA contributions? Or maybe in my current 401k, instead of doing pre-tax, should I start doing Roth? I would try to think about some other ways I could begin building those tax-free dollars other than converting potentially. Because essentially at the end of the day, you've got to figure out, if I'm going to convert these dollars and I'm going to pay taxes, is that an advantageous decision for me to make right now based on my current income? And you can't really answer that question if you have a really good beat on where you are presently and where you think you'll be in retirement. And that's how you would sort of navigate that. That's one of the questions. That's one of the reasons that people do hire an advisor to help them kind of think through, how do I implement these strategies well? How do I begin thinking through the right or the wrong way to do that? If that's something you're interested in, by all means, go check out the website. Go to aboundwealth.com. You can see our entire team of advisors. I would maybe think about getting professional help on that one because it is sort of a specialized strategy you're thinking about entering into.
Yeah, I mean, because think about it. If you're a person, you're in the highest tax bracket, potentially 39.6 with the new legislation, plus you live in a state like California where it can be 13% state income tax, and then you add on, whether it's self-employment income or other taxes on top of that, it would not be unheard of that you could potentially be paying 57% of your money to taxation. That's not going to make sense to do Roth conversion strategies under that. So, yeah, it's exactly what Bo said. This could become very customizable to your specific situation. And that's stuff you definitely want to measure twice, cut once, and consider having an advisor.